I'm writing this at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday because I can't sleep. I haven't slept properly in weeks. My hands are shaking as I type this, and I don't even know why I'm bothering to post it. Maybe because I deserve to be crucified publicly. Maybe because I need someone else to understand what happens when you destroy everything that matters to you and then find out you were already living a lie. Let me back up. 8 months ago, I was planning the honeymoon of my dreams with my wife, Rachel. We'd been together for 7 years. 7. I knew every freckle on her body, every story about her childhood, every embarrassing moment she'd ever shared with me in the dark at 2 a.m. I knew the exact way she smiled when she was genuinely happy versus when she was faking it for my parents. We had a wedding registry. We had a dog. We had plans to buy a house next year. By every measure that matters to normal people, I had won a lottery, and I threw it all away before I even realized I was holding something precious. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't show up wearing a warning sign. It starts small. It starts the way everything destructive does, harmless. Her name was Monica. She was Rachel's friend from college. Not my friend. Rachel's friend. The kind of friend who only shows up at certain parties, who you see maybe twice a year. Normal. Forgettable. Except she wasn't, because 3 years ago she moved back to our city after her divorce. And suddenly Monica was at every barbecue, every game night, every casual dinner we threw together. I didn't notice when the lines started getting crossed because I didn't want to notice it. It started as texting. Monica would ask me about work stuff. She worked in tech too, and supposedly she wanted advice on a project. Looking back now, I can see every single moment where I could have stopped. Where I could have said, hey, you should talk to Rachel about this, or maybe email me during business hours, or literally anything that didn't involve hours of late night texting about nothing that mattered. But I didn't. Because somewhere deep in my brain, in the part of me that I'm absolutely horrified by, I liked that someone found me interesting. I liked that Monica laughed at my jokes. I liked that she seemed to want to talk to me, specifically me, and not just my wife's husband. Rachel was stressed during that period. Her job was demanding. She was working late. We were stressed about some family stuff with her parents. And I remember thinking, in the moment, that I was the victim somehow. That I was neglected. That I deserved someone who appreciated me. This is where I need to be brutally honest, and I'm going to be, because this is the moment I hate myself the most. I told myself a story that made me the good guy. I told myself that Monica was just a friend. That I was just being kind to someone who'd been through a rough divorce. That Rachel was distant and didn't understand me the way Monica did. That my marriage was already broken and I was just being realistic about it. That everyone else was doing this kind of thing and I was just being human. None of that was true. Not a single word of it. Rachel was not distant. She was stressed. There's a massive difference, and I knew it then, but I chose not to care. Rachel understood me perfectly. She understood that I was the kind of guy who would cross a line for the shallow thrill of being desired by someone new. She just didn't know it yet. The texting escalated to lunch meetings. Networking, I called them. Monica would suggest coffee, and I would go. I would leave work early. I would tell Rachel I had a meeting that ran late. I became a liar so naturally it terrified me. The lies felt good because they meant something was happening that was just mine. Just mine and Monica's. I told my friend Marcus about it one night when we were drinking beer and watching a game. I expected him to shut it down. Instead, he laughed. He said, "Man, you're playing with fire, but I get it. After the honeymoon phase, everything just becomes boring, right?" He told me about his cousin who had done something similar and how it wasn't that big a deal. He made it sound like this was just what guys did. Like I was normal. Like this was expected behavior. I needed that permission. I was thirsty for it. So when Monica texted me on a Thursday night and said she couldn't stop thinking about me, I didn't shut it down. I read that message 17 times. 17. And instead of blocking her number, I drove to a parking garage 6 miles from my house at 9 p.m. while Rachel was at her book club. I'm not going to describe what happened in that car beyond saying that it was the most selfish thing I've ever done, and it took less than 10 minutes. 10 minutes to blow up my entire life. I remember feeling thrilled and ashamed in equal measure. I remember thinking about Rachel the entire time and continuing anyway. I remember checking my phone compulsively afterward to see if she'd texted me, and I remember the sick joy I felt when she had. For 2 weeks after that, I was living a double life. I would come home to Rachel, and she would be happy to see me. She'd made dinner. She'd save me a piece of chocolate cake. She'd tell me about her day. And I would kiss her while carrying the knowledge of what I'd done like a stone in my chest. The worst part? I didn't feel guilty enough to stop. I felt guilty enough to be miserable, but not guilty enough to confess or end things with Monica. Instead, I did the thing that people like me always do. I made myself the victim of my own circumstances. I complained to Monica about Rachel. Not anything real, but small things. Rachel had been tired and didn't want to have love. One night, Rachel was preoccupied with work. Rachel was talking about her mother a lot. These are the tiny grievances that exist in every marriage, and I weaponized them. I turned them into evidence that my wife didn't care about me, that I was justified in seeking attention elsewhere, that what I was doing was somehow Rachel's fault. Monica ate it up. Of course she did. She was invested now too. She told me I deserved better. She told me I was attractive and interesting and that Rachel was lucky to have me. She was mirroring exactly what I needed to hear to keep justifying myself. Rachel had no idea. For 2 months, I maintained this impossible balance. I was coming to work to meet Monica during lunch. I was texting her constantly. I was having to track my lies to make sure I didn't trip myself up. Rachel would ask me why I was on my phone so much, and I'd lie and say it was work. Rachel would suggest we go on a date, and sometimes I'd agree and sometimes I'd invent a reason why I couldn't. I was becoming someone I didn't recognize, and part of me was proud of the fact that I was getting away with it. Then Rachel got a call from her HR department. They were planning a company team building event and wanted to schedule it with families. They were going to come to her house as a surprise to Rachel because I was supposedly going to help plan it. Except I had never agreed to any of this. They were surprised when they called her to coordinate because I hadn't mentioned it. That's when I realized I hadn't actually gotten away with anything. I'd just been postponing the consequences. When Rachel asked me about it, I panicked. I lied again. I said I'd been planning it and wanted to surprise her. She seemed hurt that I hadn't told her and that the HR department had spoiled it. I apologized for the surprise being ruined. I didn't confess. I just dug the hole deeper. But something had shifted for Rachel. I could feel it. She was quieter. She was asking more questions about where I was going. She'd suggested marriage counseling one night, completely out of nowhere, and when I asked why, she said, "I just feel like we're drifting apart. I feel like I don't know you anymore." Those words destroyed me because she was right and I was still lying to her face about it. That's when I decided to apply for the passport. We had been talking about our honeymoon for so long. It was supposed to be in 4 months. Italy for 2 weeks. Everything booked. Everything paid for. I had pictures printed out and hung on our bathroom mirror. Rachel would stand there in the morning and look at those pictures like they were salvation. Like the thought of getting away together was the one thing keeping her tethered to hope that her marriage was going to be okay. I needed to apply for a passport to make that happen. And when I did, everything exploded. The state said my birth certificate was fraudulent. I remember standing in my kitchen on a Wednesday morning, holding that letter in my hands, and having absolutely no context for what it meant. I called the agency. They told me to come in person. They couldn't discuss it over the phone. And that's when I learned that I wasn't who I thought I was. That's when I learned that my entire childhood had been a lie. That's when I learned that the people I called mom and dad weren't actually my parents. That I'd been taken when I was 2 years old. That there was another family somewhere who'd been searching for me for 28 years. That's when I learned that I'd spent my entire life living someone else's identity, and in the middle of destroying my marriage and betraying the only woman who'd ever truly known me, my entire foundation turned into sand. The passport letter wasn't about Monica anymore. It wasn't about Rachel. It was about the fact that I didn't even know who I was, and I'd built a relationship with someone while being a complete lie. Rachel came home from work that day and found me sitting at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. I showed her the letter. I showed her the documentation. I showed her the private investigator's report that the state had compiled. And then I told her everything else. All of it. Monica. The parking garage. The lies. The texting. Every single transgression came pouring out of me like poison from a wound that had finally been lanced. I didn't leave anything out because at that point, what was the difference? My entire life was already exposed as a fabrication. Rachel listened to me without interrupting. She just sat there, very still, very quiet. When I was finished, she said one thing, "At least now you know that some people actually want to know who you really are." I did. And you couldn't even give me that. Then she got up and went to the bedroom and locked the door. I'm living in my brother's apartment now. Rachel won't talk to me. She's filed for divorce. She's talking to a lawyer about what happens with the house, the dog, the wedding registry that we'd already started filling. I've had to contact adoption agencies. I've had to meet with a family that supposedly gave birth to me. I've had to learn entirely new information about my genetics, my history, my origins. I've had to take a DNA test and have it confirmed. I've had to grieve the loss of my identity while simultaneously grieving the loss of my marriage because of what I did to the person who loved me when I didn't even know who I was. And the cruelest part is that none of it matters. Even if I could go back and undo the cheating, even if I could erase Monica and the lying and the betrayal, I would still be kidnapped. I would still be living in someone else's life. I would still be a fraud. But Rachel would still love me. She would still be there. She would still want to go to Italy with me. She would still look at those pictures on the bathroom mirror like they were salvation. I took that from her. I took it from me. And now I have to figure out who I actually am while knowing that I was the kind of person who would destroy something real to chase something that felt new, something that felt like it was mine, something that made me feel seen when I was too shallow to see that I was already loved. I don't know who my biological family is yet. I have meetings scheduled. I have therapy scheduled. I have lawyers and adoption specialists and DNA consultants scheduled into my calendar like some kind of bizarre nightmare that I can't wake up from. But I know exactly who I am. I'm the guy who had everything and threw it away because I was too afraid to appreciate what I had. The apartment my brother let me stay in smells like his cologne and broken dreams. He got divorced 2 years ago, and sometimes I wonder if he sees his own failure reflected in mine. He doesn't say it, but I can feel the judgment. Not harsh judgment. Worse, the kind of judgment that comes from someone who actually cares about you and has to watch you become the worst version of yourself. 3 weeks after moving in, I met my biological mother. Her name is Catherine, and she has my eyes. That sounds like something from a greeting card, something people say that's supposed to mean something profound. But when I walked into that coffee shop and saw her face across the table, I felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. She was a stranger. She was a person who'd been searching for me for 28 years, who'd spent 2.5 decades screaming and hoping and never giving up, and when she looked at me, all I could feel was hollow. She cried. She reached across the table and touched my face like she was checking if I was real. She told me about the day I was taken. She told me about the man they eventually caught, the one who'd taken me from a park while she was in a bathroom. She told me about the investigation, the false leads, the years of not knowing if I was alive or dead. And I sat there thinking about Rachel. I thought about how Rachel's face had looked when I confessed everything. Not angry. Not even surprised, in the way that shock reads on a face. Just disappointed. Devastated in the way that only comes when someone you love does something unforgivable and you have to reconcile the person you thought they were with the person they actually are. Catherine asked me questions about my life. About the people I thought were my parents. About my childhood. About whether they were good to me. She asked these questions like she was assembling pieces of a puzzle, like if she just got enough information, she could understand how I'd become someone real instead of the ghost she'd been chasing. I'd told her they were good parents. I told her I'd had a happy childhood. And while I was saying it, I realized that this information would hurt her. Because she'd spent 28 years imagining the worst, she'd probably constructed 1,000 different scenarios in her mind about where I was, what had happened to me. And now she was learning that the man who'd taken me had kept me safe. That I'd been loved. That she'd missed 28 years of a life that had actually been pretty good. Her grief shifted mid-conversation. I watched it happen. The grief changed from my need to get my son back to I lost 28 years and I'm never getting them back. I couldn't help her with that. I had my own avalanche of the same grief heading toward me at full speed. The legal stuff moved faster than I expected. The state worked quickly once they'd confirmed my identity. My birth certificate was officially amended. My social security number was cross-referenced with my real name. My adoption records were sealed and filed. Apparently, the man who'd taken me had been prosecuted 15 years ago and was currently serving life in prison. The case was closed. Cold. Over. I was a footnote in someone else's crime story. My adoptive parents, for the people I'd always known as my parents, came to see me at my brother's apartment. That was brutal in a way I wasn't prepared for. The man I called Dad sat on the couch and cried. He said, "We should have told you. We should have told you as soon as you were old enough to understand. I'm so sorry." I realized in that moment that my entire childhood had been a lie because of their choices. They'd known. They'd always known that I wasn't biologically theirs, but they'd let me believe I was. They'd let me walk around the world as someone I wasn't. And when everything fell apart, they felt guilty about it like they were responsible for my infidelity. I spent an entire evening reassuring people who'd lied to me my entire life that it wasn't their fault. Meanwhile, I didn't call Rachel once. I wanted to. Every single day, I wanted to call her and say something that would make her understand. Something that would make what I'd done seem smaller or more forgivable or contextualized by the fact that my entire identity was a fraud. Like she should care about any of that. Like she should care that my life was complicated when I'd specifically and deliberately made hers complicated. Her lawyer sent me the divorce papers after 4 weeks. I got them on a Thursday morning. All the financial stuff was already decided. She wasn't fighting me for anything. She wanted the house, the dog, and for me to sign the papers quickly so we could both move on. The instructions were clinical and efficient. Everything about Rachel's response was designed to remove me from her life as quickly as possible. I signed them without reading them carefully. That's when I realized I'd actually lost her. It wasn't the affair that did it. It wasn't Monica or the parking garage or the texting. It was the fact that after I told her the truth, after I'd exposed myself completely, I still couldn't do the one thing that mattered. I couldn't actually be honest. I couldn't own what I'd done without making it about something else. I couldn't apologize without also asking for understanding. I couldn't take responsibility without also asking for forgiveness. Rachel deserves someone who could do those things. I spent 2 weeks after that not leaving the apartment. My brother brought me food. He didn't ask questions. He just left it outside the door like he was feeding something dangerous that might bite him if he got too close. I scrolled through old photos of Rachel. I found the pictures we'd taken at the wedding. I found the videos from our honeymoon a year and a half earlier. I found the selfies from just before everything went wrong, the ones where we're both laughing in some random coffee shop, where she's looking at me like I'm the person she actually chose. Like I was worth choosing. I blocked Monica's number. I blocked her on social media. I deleted all the messages. I deleted the text thread that had been the beginning of the end. I did all of this like erasing evidence would change what had happened, like deleting the message thread would somehow delete the parking garage moment, the betrayal, the lies. It didn't. It just made me feel like I was performing redemption for an audience of one. My biological family invited me to a family dinner. Catherine wanted me to meet my biological father, my siblings, my extended family. She was trying to rebuild a relationship that had been interrupted before it even started. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to see their faces, to hear their stories about the missing piece of their family that had finally been found. But I went, because avoiding it seemed cowardly, and I'd already proven I was capable of cowardice. My biological father's name is David. He's an accountant. He has gray at his temples and laugh lines around his eyes. He shook my hand when I met him, and something in me wanted to say, "I'm sorry. I'm not the son you've been waiting for. The person you've been grieving all these years. That's not me. I'm just the body they're attached this missing person identity to." But I didn't say that. I shook his hand and pretended. My biological sister is named Emma. She's 3 years younger than me, which means she was born during one of the years that Catherine was still searching for me. She asked me about my childhood, and when I told her about my adoptive family, she looked sad in a way that I realized meant she'd been sad about me her entire life. She'd grown up knowing she had a brother somewhere. She'd grown up with that absence. I'd stolen her entire childhood experience, and she was being gracious about it at dinner. That's when I realized that my infidelity wasn't actually the worst thing I'd done. The worst thing I'd done was not see that people's love for me existed independent of my awareness of it. My biological family loved me before they met me. Rachel loved me and didn't need anything in return except honesty. Monica had lied to me about loving me because what she was actually doing was giving me permission to be selfish. And I'd chosen the permission. At work, people started noticing I was falling apart. I'd been out of the office for weeks, and when I finally went back, I could barely focus on code. I made mistakes. Stupid mistakes. The kind of mistakes you make when you're not paying attention because your entire life is collapsing and you're too much of a coward to actually do anything about it. My boss called me into his office after a particularly bad bug that I'd introduced into production. He closed the door. He looked at me with that specific expression that managers have when they've heard the rumors, when they know something is wrong, when they've decided whether or not to give a shit about your personal life. He gave a shit. He asked if I was okay. He asked if I needed to take time off. He offered me resources, therapists, counselors, crisis lines. And I sat there, and for the first time in weeks, someone was offering me actual help without strings attached. And all I could think was, Rachel would have done this too, and I didn't deserve it from her. I told him about the divorce. I didn't tell him about the affair or Monica or the parking garage. I just said my marriage was ending and I was struggling with my identity. Both of those things were technically true. He gave me a month off. 6 days into that month, I got a call from Rachel's mother. She was furious. She wanted to know how I could do this to her daughter. She wanted to know what kind of man I was. She wanted to tell me that Rachel wasn't eating, wasn't sleeping, and was spending most of her time crying or staring at nothing. I wanted to tell her that I was a man who'd been stolen from his life, who didn't know who he was, who'd made terrible choices because he was desperate to feel something real. But all of that would have been an excuse, and Rachel's mother had called to tell me that excuses didn't matter. She told me that Rachel loved me so much that she thought she might have been the problem. She thought the reason I'd cheated was because she wasn't enough. She thought she'd failed as a wife. That's when I started to understand the full scope of what I'd done. I didn't just betray Rachel. I didn't just lie to her. I made her question herself. I made her internalize my failures as her own shortcomings. I made her believe that if she'd been different, better, more, then I wouldn't have needed Monica. And the cruelest part is that Rachel is perfect. She's exactly who she's always been. Smart, kind, loyal, beautiful. I just couldn't see it because I was too busy looking for something that felt new. I hung up the phone, and I called my therapist and asked for an emergency appointment. He asked me if I was having thoughts of harming myself. I said no. I was too much of a coward to hurt myself. I was only good at hurting other people. I was good at making selfishness look like self-discovery. I was good at making betrayal look like bad luck. But I couldn't fix it. That's the thing nobody tells you about consequences. They don't end. They just keep cascading forward. Rachel's mother is suffering because Rachel is suffering. My adoptive parents are suffering because they're carrying guilt for something that isn't their fault. My biological family is suffering because they're grieving for a person who's alive but who they'll never actually know. And I'm suffering because I'm the one who caused all of it. There are no redemption moments coming. There are no dramatic scenes where I make a grand gesture and Rachel realizes she still loves me. There are no twisted plot turns where everything works out because it turns out I'm innocent or justified or victimized by circumstances beyond my control. I'm not a victim. I'm just a guy who had everything and threw it away, and then found out he never knew what he had in the first place. The one thing I've learned is that there's a difference between not knowing who you are and refusing to see who you've become. I didn't know I was kidnapped. But I absolutely knew that I was lying to Rachel. I absolutely knew that I was betraying her. I absolutely knew that what I was doing would hurt her. And I did it anyway. And now every time I see my biological father's face or hear my biological mother's voice or sit across from my biological siblings, I'm reminded that there are people who spent their entire lives missing me, and the person they're getting is a liar and a cheater and someone who abandoned the only real love he's ever had because it wasn't new and it wasn't exciting and it required him to appreciate what he had instead of constantly chasing what he didn't. The papers are finalized now. Rachel and I are officially divorced. She's kept the house and the dog. I'm still in my brother's apartment. I'm going to therapy 3 times a week. I'm in contact with my biological family, though I'm not sure if that's healing or just another form of punishment. But the most painful part is this: Rachel would understand if I explained it all to her. She would listen. She would probably even forgive me eventually. She's that kind of person. And that's exactly why I can't call her. Because she deserves to move on to someone who won't betray her. She deserves to build a life with someone who actually sees her. She deserves to go to Italy with someone who will appreciate every moment instead of taking it for granted while they're texting another woman. I ruined her timeline. I stole her years. I made her question who she was as a partner and as a person. And the only thing I can give her now is the gift of my absence.